Rewinds. 1 00039. Jigsaw, Rubik. Twist, twist, twist. He chews on his thoughts like a piece of gum that has long since lost its flavor. 00039 still believes he might one day make sense of those thoughts. He has no choice but to believe, because losing the hope of having hope would be unimaginable. Almost as unimaginable as his existence. I know you all must be angry, confused. You have every right to be. School of salmon, gaggle of geese, murder of crows. There are many others here in this group of diced and sliced souls, all like him. They are ugly. They are scarred. They pass their timeless days babbling their own particular incoherences. And fighting, always fighting. But with whose hands do they fight? Does anyone know? I'm here to ease you through this, to help you find yourselves, and you will. I promise that. Pretty boy, media star, first of his kind. Different parts of 00039 remember the young man's addressing them. He was the sparkling example of what could be. He was the dream before the nightmare. Camus Comprix. Unlike the dozens of rewinds gathered here on Molokai, Camus Comprix has gentle seams instead of jagged scars. Unlike them, his many flesh tones are well designed and symmetrical. Expanding out from a dynamic sunburst in the center of his forehead. Unlike them, his hair, filled with texture and tints, redefines the very concept of style. He's a work of art, unlike them. And yet, he claims to be one of them. 00039 knows he is no work of art. Even though he has never seen himself in the mirror, he knows because he can see versions of himself reflected in the rewinds all around him. All of them are in their teens with no specific age. They are a mix of many ages. All of them are caught between what they once were and what they might become. How did this happen? How did this terrible state of existence happen? Jigsaw, Rubik, twist, twist, twist. If only he could think more clearly. I've been where you are, insists Camus Comprix, the golden child. I know how painful it is, but you will integrate. The pieces do come together if you keep working at it. It's comforting to hear, but nothing 00039 has seen here proves it. The only rewind ever to fully reintegrate is the one addressing them. If only 00039 could just be a little bit of what Camus is, it will be enough. So instead of resenting him, the rewind makes a decision to admire him. Camus was rewound just like them, yes, but with much greater care. He was rewound from bits and pieces of others. 00039 remembers his unwinding, or rather, he remembers echoes of dozens of unwindings. When he first awoke and regained awareness, he thought that he was living in a divided state, that the juvenile authorities' propaganda must be true, and this is what it felt like to be alive, but divided. Soon, however, he came to realize that this was something very different, and when he realized what he was, he felt ashamed. What happened to you was a crime, Camus Comprix says. I can't change that. What I can do is teach you to live with dignity. The rewind next to 00039 turns to him with disturbingly empty, mismatched eyes. Snake, he says, pointing to Comprix. Janus, Lucifer. Then he smiles a twisted grin. Lincoln, Kennedy, King, he says. Bang, bang. Police have no leads. 00039 doesn't know what he means and doesn't want to. Whatever it is, it's unpleasant. He ignores the rewind beside him and turns his attention back to Camus Comprix, so sharp in his military uniform, so convincing in his eloquence. 00039 wants to believe everything he says is true. Messiah, communion, hallelujah. Yes, perhaps this firstborn rewind can save him. 2. Cam. He leaves the ward sick to his stomach, not from what he sees, but from what he feels. There's no level of hell deep enough for Roberta and her colleagues. Yes, Roberta was sentenced to life in prison, but it's not enough. No punishment could ever be enough for having created these poor creatures. No, Cam tells himself, not creatures. They are human beings. Cam has finally come to see himself as human. It was a struggle to get there, to truly believe it. How much harder will it be for these rewinds, who do not have the advantages he had? They were not made from hand-picked parts. They were not created from the best of the best. They were hashed together from a random pool of unwinds, without regard for anything other than their ability to hold a weapon. They were to be the start of a slave army. For when you're a collection of parts, you're not a person, you're property. At least that's how General Boddicker saw it. Well, he's in prison along with Roberta. And now, the world has been left to deal with their prototype army of rewinds. Cam, now a hero, volunteered to tend to them. The military was more than happy to put them in his hands. Although Cam was just a cadet, everyone agreed there was no one more suited to oversee the rewinds on Molokai. The military sees him as a glorified babysitter, keeping the rewinds under guard and out of public sight. They don't care if the rewinds ever find peace and purpose, but Cam does. That was a good speech, says the military doctor, catching up with him as he exits the rewind dormitory building. I'm not sure they understood any of it, but it was very inspirational. They head for the main complex nearly half a mile away. A golf cart is available to take him, but Cam would rather walk. Most of them understood, Cam tells him. The doctor dons shades to guard his eyes from the harsh Hawaiian sun. Yes, I suppose you would know. Dr. Pettigrew clearly resents Cam's presence here. Good. Let him resent it. The man's orders were clear. He is to answer to Cam as if Cam is his superior officer. His resentment is a nuisance, but not an obstacle. Cam will do what he needs to do here. The females seemed more attentive, the doctor says as they take the path leading toward the mansion, which is still the center of operations. The girls, corrects Cam. The doctor might see them as animals, but Cam won't let that mentality take hold in a way he speaks of them. There are fewer girls among the rewinds, reflecting proactive citizenry's bias in the creation of the prototype army. Cam is even more sympathetic to the girls than he is to the boys. Seeing them nearly brings him to tears each time. He has to remind himself that it could have been worse. Roberta could have created them all sexless. Cam stops walking halfway between the rewind building and the mansion. Tall cane and bamboo rise behind him, hiding the rewind building from view. Before him are taro plants to the edge of the cliffs. Even from here, he can hear the pounding surf. Molokai was once a leper colony, as isolated as a place can be. The world would be happy to make this a rewind colony and never think about it again. People can't abide the thought of killing them. But they don't want to make the rewinds but they do want to make the rewinds go away. That won't happen on Cam's watch. Planning a picnic? Asked the doctor, impatient at Cam's moment of reflection. I want you to set up appointments with each of the rewinds, he tells the doctor, who stares at him as if he hasn't heard correctly. Appointments? You can't be serious. With all due respect, they have the cognitive capacity of chimpanzees right now. And if we want that to change, we'll start treating them as human beings. Not a mob of apes. Still, the doctor hesitates. Or maybe you don't want that to change, Cam suggests, reading the man more deeply than he'd want to be read. Maybe it's easier for you to see them as less than human. The man bristles. Spare me the psychoanalysis. Cam smiles. The doctor is pushing 40 and he's being given orders by someone half his age. Cam allows himself a moment, but only a moment, to gloat over his position. Appointments with each of them, Cam repeats before continuing on to the mansion. Beginning at 9 tomorrow morning. And you'll be there with me for each interview? And he strides off, knowing the doctor has no choice but to make it happen. Your turn, she says. Play something. Oh. Cam lives in the wing of the mansion where he first came to consciousness. Even with all the negative memories, this is and always has been his home. He finds Una out back, sitting in a lawn chair in the expansive yard overlooking the sea, the same place where he once looked at the stars with the girl he can't remember. He's learning to come to terms with that absence of memory. It's a melancholy that is filled by the presence of Una. He quietly comes up behind her. She just finished tuning one of his guitars and has begun to play it. She plays well, but never plays for others, and certainly not for him. She'll only play when she thinks no one is listening. He waits a few yards behind her, listening until she senses his presence and stops. The humidity here warps the wood, she tells him. Can't get a single instrument to sound right. Sounded fine to me. She huffs at that. Then they must have gotten your ears from the bargain basement. He gives her an obligatory chuckle and sits beside her. We should have brought one of your guitars with us to show them how it's done. I'm sure there are plenty of guitars on the islands, she says proudly. People have crossed oceans for my instruments. Finally, she takes a moment to assess him. You spoke to the rewinds today, didn't you? She asks. How did it go? Fine, I guess, Cam tells her. No surprises. And then adds, I wish you would have come. The air was too warm for a chill, but she shifts her shoulders and back as if she had one. It wasn't my place to be there. I would have been just one more thing to confuse them, and you know it. We're here to do this together, he reminds her. Then she looks him dead in the eye. Then give me something to do. I'm not an accessory for you to wear on your arm. Cam sighs. How can I give you something to do when I don't really know how to play this myself? Una considers that, then gives the guitar a single decisive pat. It resounds with a gentle thud. Tell you what. You work on your melody, and I'll find my own harmony. The perfect combination, Cam says. Then he reaches behind her, pulling the tie from her hair and letting her hair fall free. Stop that, she says. You know I hate that. But he knows she doesn't. He knows she puts that tie there just for him to pull it out. He smiles and playfully says, Tell me how much you despise me. More than anything in the world, she answers, clearly suppressing a grin. Tell me how sorry you are that you married me. She glares at him, but it's all for show. I didn't marry you, she points out. I married your hands. I'm sure there's a hacksaw somewhere on the compound, if those are the only parts of me you want. She puts the guitar down on the grass. Just shut up, you stupid quill. Then she grabs him and kisses him, biting his lower lip just enough for it to hurt. She'll never kiss him without first insulting him. He's grown to enjoy that almost as much as her mildly painful kisses. Then, as she lets him go, she says something she's never said before. I don't know whose lips I'm kissing, but I'm starting to like them. Then, she pushes him back in his chair, so hard he almost falls over backward and thrusts the guitar at him. Your turn, she says. Play something. And then, gentler, it'll relax you. Maybe give your mind a break from the rewinds. He holds the guitar, which has grown warm from the midday sun. Should I play something of Will's, he asks. She looks at the hands that once belonged to her fiancé, Will Tashine, and says gently, No, play something of yours. And so he pulls together a brand new tune for Una from the random fabric of this multi-textured day. A tune that feeds underscores the growing bond between them without forgetting the ominous tone of the task before them. 3-00039. The rewind is escorted to a room down a winding hallway that he knows isn't winding at all. It's straight. It's only his mind that sees it otherwise. He knows that now. He knows that walls that seem crooked are not, and that oddly angled windows are actually perfect rectangles. The more he tells his mind this, the more he begins to accept it. Even his muscles are learning to cooperate when he walks. Camus Comprix was right. Integration will come if he makes it happen. They lead him into a room, and in that room sits none other than Camus and the doctor, who has never talked directly to him, just around him, about him, as if he's not present. While the doctor looks at his tablet, tapping in notes, Camus rises and smiles warmly, extending his hand in a gesture of greeting. 00039 puts his hand out to shake, but realizes he's thrust forth the wrong hand. Red mark, fumble, typo, he says. Still, Camus smiles and waits for him to switch hands, which he does. He shakes 00039's hand. The word you're looking for is mistake, Camus says without an ounce of judgment. Mistake, repeats the rewind, owning the word and taking pride in that ownership. Good word, meaty word. He'll remember it. You'll make a lot of them, Camus says, and that's okay. 00039 nods and points to his own head. Jigsaw, Rubik, twist, twist, twist. Ha, says Camus Comprix. Tell me about it. Being rewound is like a puzzle in 4 dimensions. He sits and gestures for the rewind to sit as well. The doctor continues taking notes, looking up occasionally, content to be excluded from the conversation. Still not knowing what this is all about, the rewind says only one thing he can get out. Riddler, riddle me this. Camus takes a moment to decipher it, then finally gets it. Ah, big question mark on his chest, right? You're asking me why. Why are you here? 00039 nods, but then realizes he shook his head instead. Still, Camus knows what he meant. You're here so that we can get to know each other, and for me to help with anything you're having trouble with. 00039 takes a deep, shuddering breath. Is there anything that he isn't having trouble with? It's not only a matter of where to begin, but how to express it. First are the enemies. The enemies have been troubling him since he first noticed them. He holds his hands up so Camus and the doctor can see the enemies for themselves. Left, right, he says, looking from one hand to the other and back again. This. He raises his left hand, which is pale sienna. Hates this, he says, raising his other hand, which is a deep shade of umber brown. The doctor looks at Cam, and Cam nods in understanding. Okay, says Cam, so you've got one umber hand and one of your brain bits is a bit racist. Well, that brain bit is just going to have to learn to deal with it. 00039 nods, not entirely sure that's possible, but willing to let Cam take him for the ride. Think of it this way, Camus says. There are 100 men inside a submarine. They come from different places, different backgrounds. Some are decent, some are creeps. But they all have to work together or that submarine goes down. You're the submarine. The crew will learn to work together. Trust each other even, because they have to. 00039 nods. The only submarine that comes to mind is yellow, but he knows that doesn't matter. It's the function Camus Comprix is talking about, not the form. There's one more reason you're here, Camus says. If you ask me, I think it's the most important one. Then he leans forward, giving more weight to what he's about to say. You're here to find your name. The rewind can't fully comprehend the thought. The brand on his ankle says 00039. That's the only designation he knows. The concept of being anything else makes the various parts of his brain chafe and itch. I'll bet there are a lot of names kicking around your internal community, Camus says. It was something that 00039 never considered before, but now that it's been suggested to him, the names come dropping out of his mouth. Sean, Ethan, Armando, Ralphie, Devon, Ahmed, Joel. The doctor looks up, raising his eyebrows. Remarkable. Camus puts 2 pages in front of the rewind. On those pages are lists of names. These are the kids who were unwind to create all of you. First, Find a first name, a middle name, and then a last name that really speak to you. Rewind your own name from this list, and that's who you will be. 00039 furrows his brow as he concentrates enough to make the seams on his face ache. He knows this is important. The first important thing he's been asked to do since being rewound. A number of names on the list have been crossed out, names that other rewinds must have already taken, but more than half of them still remain. As he looks over the list, some names leap out to him as if rising off of the page. With the name Keaton comes a flash of a blue room covered in posters and draped with dirty clothes that rarely made it into the hamper. With Miguel comes the memory of Christmas, and the last name Shelton almost makes him stand up and shout, "Here!" He points to those three names. The doctor taps them out on his tablet, and Camus crosses them off the list. No one would have those names but him. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Keaton Miguel Shelton," says Camus. He holds out his hand, and Keaton shakes it, getting the handshake right the first time. He returns to the dormitory feeling he's accomplished something, and later that night, he receives a present in a box labeled for Keaton M. Shelton. It's a pre-war plastic toy, a Rubik's Cube courtesy of Camus Comprix. 4. Cam. The rewinds all receive names. There are far more names on the list than there are rewinds, so no one leaves without a choice. None leave feeling slighted. Cam works to remember each of their names and faces. At first, it's hard to tell them apart. They all have shaved heads that have barely begun to grow in, and the asymmetry makes it even harder. The human mind is designed to recognize faces, not mosaics, and the hodgepodge nature of the features leaves little for the mind to grasp. It isn't until Cam starts focusing on the scars that he begins to tell them apart. Every rewind has their own individual scar pattern. Soon, he knows many of them by name, but not all of them. There are those who keep their distance, lurking in the shadows whenever he's around. Cam chooses to let that go. If he gives them peace and enough time, they'll come out of their shell when they're ready. Una has found her harmony. She now wields a camera documenting the colony's progress. "I have to choose my images wisely," she tells Cam. "I have to show the rewinds as both triumphant and tragic. People have to see them as human, but must always remember what a bad idea it was to create them." Cam knows what she says is true, but it still hits him in a very personal place. Like it was a bad idea to create me? "Oh, please," says Una with a dismissive wave. "Why must it always be about you?" But then she considers it a little more seriously. "The world is full of bad ideas that turn into wonderful things," she says, and gives him a peck on the cheek. 5. Keaton. Spirits are high in the rewind ward after naming day. There are fewer fights and more laughter. There are hints at real communication between the rewinds. Keaton is happy to watch, enjoying the change. The sense of a future is so much more compelling than an endless present. He watches two kids attempt a game of checkers. They get a whole 5 minutes into the game before one of them flips the board in anger. The guards have to pull them apart. 5 minutes, that's a great start. Tomorrow it might be 10. Then someone raps Keaton hard on the shoulder. He turns to see the rewind with hollow, mismatched eyes. "Dirk," he says, and raps Keaton on the arm again. "Dirk Mullen. Dirk Zachary Mullen." He keeps hitting Keaton until Keaton says, "Dirk." "Yeah, got it." "You, me?" Dirk says, part, and he holds up his right hand. It's the exact same shade of brown as Keaton's left hand, and Keaton realizes that those hands came from the same unwind. They're a matching pair. Suddenly, Dirk grabs Keaton's upper hand with his. It feels strange yet familiar, clasping those hands together. "Brother self," says Dirk, "hand of my hand." Dirk doesn't let go. Finally, Keaton repeats, "Hand of my hand," and Dirk, satisfied, releases his grip. "You, me, take no prisoners," Dirk says, then laughs. "Police have no leads." The guards begin herding the rewinds into the cafeteria for dinner, and Keaton slips away from Dirk Zachary Mullen, finding a crowded table to make sure that Dirk can't join him if he wanted to. Keaton eats, but he has no appetite because all he can think about is Dirk and those eyes. Most of the rewind's eyes are mismatched, but it's much more than that when it comes to Dirk. There is something Keaton saw in Dirk's eyes, and it frightens him, because the something he saw was nothing. 6. Cam. Cam decides to allow the rewinds outside. Not outside the compound's fence, of course, just outside of the rewind ward. Some who express an interest are given jobs to add to their self-respect. Menial labor, Dr. Pettigrew notes, is probably all they can hope for. Cam won't dignify that with a response. For their leisure time, Cam gives a group of them basketballs, and they all are allowed to play on the court by the main mansion. Unwinds, Cam recalls, were monitored in harvest camps so that prices could be put on their muscle groups. Cam makes sure there are no video cameras watching them now as they play. Cam still runs the many paths of the Molokai compound. He encourages the rewinds to run with him, leading by example. "Sound body will bring a sound mind," he tells them. "Teach your muscles to work together and the rest will follow." Some run with him, others walk the route more slowly, unable to coax their reformed selves into the complex concert of a jog. Some don't come at all. Cam won't force them. Everyone has a different timetable. "Is it really wise to give them this much freedom?" Dr. Pettigrew asks, clearly thinking Cam a fool for not keeping them locked up in the ward. If it were up to the good doctor, the rewinds would have turned into institutional vegetables unable to function outside of the rewind ward. "They'll all be free eventually," Cam tells him. "They should learn how it feels now." He knows that the doctor is sending reports back to their superiors. Cam can only hope that they'll take Pettigrew's reports with a grain of salt, and that his own progress with the rewinds will be proof of Cam's approach. But what if they want what the doctor wants? What if they don't care about rehabilitation? What if they simply wish to brush all these rewinds under a rug and make the world forget about them? He must believe that if he can prove their value, their humanity, his superiors will see what a mistake it is to keep them locked away. After today's run, Cam finds Una in the mansion's grand living room. It's a place of many memories. It holds the mirror where he first saw himself, the large tabletop computer interface where Roberta coaxed his reintegration through pictures and torturous mental exercises. Today, Una also has pictures open on the table face. Her photos. She scrutinizes them intently. "Come here, I want to show you something," she tells him. The desktop is awash with the digital photos of the rewinds, but she moves her hands across the tabletop screen, swiping most of the images aside and centering 3. They aren't the best of her photos. These are grainy and pixelated as if they were taken from a distance, then enlarged. They're all of the same subject. "This rewind here, do you know him?" Cam is a bit embarrassed to admit that he doesn't, although he's made great efforts to treat each rewind like an individual. There are those who fall through the cracks, or rather hide in the cracks. This is one of them. He probably stays out of sight when Cam is around. Cam knows he must have had a meeting with him, but he probably was one of the silent ones who didn't meet Cam's eyes. "Take a closer look," Una says, then she enlarges the central photo. He has one umber hand and badly mismatched eyes that just seem to be staring off into nowhere. He disappears when he sees me, so these are the only pictures I have of him. She thrums her nails on the glass surface. Something about him bothers me. Cam can see why. There's a vacancy about him that is unique. Looking at him is like looking into an empty bag. It's as if Cam begins to say, but then banishes the thought before it has time to surface. Instead, he says, it looks like he's having trouble integrating. Una takes a deep, probing look at him. Cam hates when she does that. It's more than that, and you know it. All I know, Cam says, his voice rising just the slightest bit, is that every rewind has to be given time and the chance to become who they are. What if they're not becoming anyone? Una asks. Not every collection of parts makes a whole. Lockdown, the thought hits Cam like it used to in the old days. When there was a thought so dangerous he dropped a firewall of self-preservation in front of it. He doesn't let the word escape his lips. However, instead, he clamps his jaw shut until the impulse passes. The impulse passes. And he says in a whisper that's almost threatening, "Careful, Una." But Una is not one to tread lightly, not even in a minefield. "Why?" she asks. "You think one soulless rewind means you all might be?" This time, Cam lets his mind go into lockdown rather than face the question. 7. Keaton. Keaton twists and twists and twists the Rubik's Cube, never seeming to come closer to solving it. He gets a single row of matching colors, but trying to get the next row ruins the first. He fights through his frustration and tries again. "You know there's a trick," a guard tells him. "I can show it to you." He holds out his hand, but Keaton holds the cube out of reach. "No trick. Figure it out. Figure it myself." "Fine," says the guard. "Have it your way." Keaton tries to give all his attention to the toy, but can't help but be distracted by 00047, the one named Dirk. Dirk is making plans. Keaton knows it, but can't be sure what those plans are. That rewind isn't just dark, he's opaque, like obsidian, jagged and sharp. For a while, Keaton watched Dirk try to win the favor of other rewinds, but no one would have anything to do with him. He's been shunned from the pack. They all sense that something is wrong with Dirk, although none have put words to it. Now, Dirk just lingers and lurks, eats and sleeps, and he watches through those eyes that don't seem to have anyone living behind them. "Bad one, that 47, one of the rewound girls says to Keaton. Most of the others still refer to Dirk by his numeric designation, 10-foot pole. "I hear that," Keaton tells her, and although Keaton wants to keep a 10-foot full distance, Dirk is always singling him out for conversation. Perhaps because Keaton's cold shoulder isn't quite as cold as everyone else's. "You, me, vroom, vroom," Dirk says, "born to be wild, hand of my hand." Yeah, sure, whatever. But whatever isn't enough for Dirk. "You, me, Oswald, Ruby Booth, then bail. Police have no leads." He smiles an empty grin that couldn't be more chilling on a skeleton and grabs Keaton's arm, nails digging in. "Butch and Sundance." Keaton tugs free. For a moment he thinks he's taken Dirk's hand with him, because he can still feel those fingertips gripping his arm long after he's gone. The ward doors are left open during the day on campus complex orders. He doesn't want them to feel like prisoners. The doctor blusters about it, and he blusters about everything. He's placated when extra guards are put on duty. The compound is well fenced off from the rest of the island. In most places, it's a double fence with a 20-foot no man's land between, but not everywhere. There's one spot where a jogging path is separated from an outside road by nothing but a single fence. It's where locals will sometimes gather to get a glimpse of the rewinds they've heard about but haven't seen. It works both ways. The rewinds want to look out as much as the locals want to look in. On this day, Keaton takes the perimeter path, telling himself that he's just going for a jog, but he knows that's an excuse. There are a few cars on the road, parked there on the other side of the fence. A few islanders wait for a rewind to show his face. Some are actually native Hawaiians, but just as many are sienna transplants from places they chose to get away from. Keaton rests from his run, and a Hawaiian girl, 16, maybe 17, cautiously approaches the fence. Hello, she says, like it's a question, not a greeting. Hi, Keaton says. Scared? Don't, he says, then corrects himself. Don't be scared, I mean. Okay. She seems a little scared anyways. Keaton, he says. Kellyanna, she answers. Keaton points to his face. Ugly, right? But Kellyanna shakes her head. No, just weird. It makes Keaton smile. He can deal with weird, and his smile makes her smile. And then suddenly something eclipses them both. Out of nowhere, Dirk hurls himself against the fence like an animal, gripping it with his hands. Kellyanna gasps and jumps back. Prom night, shouts Dirk. Prom night, back seat, he snarls at Kellyanna with the nastiest of grins. Make you like it, make you like it. You. Then Kellyanna looks at Keaton like Dirk is somehow his fault, and she runs away. No, calls Keaton desperately. Him, not me, I'm not him. But it's too late. Keaton turns to Dirk. Hate. Keaton snaps at Dirk. Hate you! Dirk doesn't seem to care. He just holds up his left hand. Hand of my hand, me, you, same. The first rock hits the fence with a resounding rattle. The second one gets through, hitting Keaton on the arm. He turns to see that the other island kids have armed themselves and are throwing stones at the two of them. Get lost, they yell. Stinking monsters. Ground beef, one of them says, and the others laugh and start repeating it. Ground beef, ground beef. Dirk is the first to run, but Keaton stands his ground a moment longer until a rock hits his forehead and he realizes it's no use. They'll keep throwing stones as long as he remains a target. Ground beef, ground beef. So he turns, leaving the path, and heads into the dense brush to escape them. His only consolation is that Kellyanna wasn't throwing stones too. Rewinds sleep the sleep of the dead, maybe because they've tasted it. When Keaton dreams, they're mostly variations on memories, even more disjointed than normal dreams, because the memories are from dozens of different people. But when he dreams of things he's seen after his rewinding, those images are almost as sharp as waking life. He has a dream of Kellyanna, of walking with her on Molokai's finest beach, which happens to be part of the colony compound. Is it so wrong for him to be dreaming of her? The doctor keeps expecting the male rewinds to be attracted to the girls among them, as if they are their own species. In nature, even the most hideous of creatures are attracted to one another. But rewinds are not a species. The girls find the boys frightening and repulsive to the core, and the boys' disgust is returned in equal measure. There will be no brides of Frankenstein among the bunch. Keaton suspects no girl in the outside world will want to be with him, but the rules of dreams are different. How infuriating it is, then, when he is shaken out of the depths of such a fine dream. Sawshank, Sawshank! It's Dirk. He whispers into Keaton's ear so close it doesn't sound like a whisper at all. Go away. But Dirk won't leave him alone. Sawshank, now, now! Go away, not your friend. Dirk grabs his umber hand. Hand of my hand, you me now. Finally, Keaton sits up and Dirk points to the door of the ward. You me now. The last thing Keaton wants is to get involved with whatever trouble Dirk has in mind, but somehow he's become Dirk's keeper. There are 2 guards on duty at the rewind ward, one for the girls and one for the boys. Currently, the male guard is not at his post, probably on a perimeter check. Security cameras are everywhere, but few of them are on. They are leftovers from when the facility was bustling with activity. Now it's just the 2 wards of dispossessed souls. At the door, which is always locked from the outside, Dirk produces from his pocket a proactive citizenry security pass featuring the picture of some serious-looking man. Finders keepers, says Dirk. No surprise there. The rewinds are constantly finding things left over from proactive citizenry's reign of this place. He taps the pass to the reader. The door unlocks. Sesame, Dirk says with the same flat effect with which he says everything. But Keaton's emotions are anything but flat. Half of him wants to turn around and return to the comfort of his bed. But if he does, and Dirk gets into some kind of trouble, it will be bad for all of them. So Keaton follows the soulless rewind into the cricket-filled night. In the stark silver light of a gibbous moon, Dirk leads them to the fence where the locals threw stones at them. The fence is high and rimmed with several rows of tranked-coated barbed wire. With a single prick, you're rendered unconscious and fall, landing hard enough to break bones and maybe your neck. For a rewind still integrating, he wouldn't be surprised if they just popped apart like Legos. The thought makes him queasy. Pointless, Keaton says. Can't climb out, pointless. He grabs Dirk's arm. Back now, late, sleep. Better for you than this. But Dirk shrugs out of his grip and walks farther down the fence to a spot where there's a hole in the chain link just big enough to squeeze through. Clearly the chain link was cut by bolt cutters and probably from the outside. He once heard guards complaining about how the locals would sneak onto the property since some of the island's best beaches are on the compound. They rarely did it in the days of proactive citizenry because their guards shot trespassers on sight, but Cam's guards are all armed with tranks, which are much less intimidating if you're not an AWOL unwind. Dirk must have found this hole the other day and concealed it. Now there's no barrier between them and the outside world. Keaton feels his heart begin to pound so painfully in his chest, he's afraid it might bounce right out. No, Keaton says. Not out there. Not yet. Not ready. None of us. Although he knows that's not entirely true. Some of them might be ready. He certainly feels he is, but Dirk is not. Keaton suspects that he never will be. Maybe that's why Dirk feels the need to break out. Dirk looks at him with cool curiosity. You, me, he says. Frank and Jesse, police have no leads? No, Keaton insists. He can't deny there are plenty of rebellious brain bits that see a hole in the fence as an opportunity, but his will is beginning to exert coherence. Submariners. They must work together for the good of all, and right now sailing back to port is the best strategy. Go back now, sleep, forget this. Dirk shrugs. You lose, he says, then slams a rock he's been concealing into Keaton's head, knocking him out cold.